to Dial It Up, and today we are talking about the new rules for vehicles. So the first thing you'll notice with vehicles versus the old vehicle rules, this was for a GCPD cruiser, is all of them words have now been neatly condensed to about that. So right off the bat, we know that it's been cut down a lot to be simplified in the wording, or at least that's what we're being told. So let's go over it. The first thing is just the generic vehicles ability or trait or just rule. Not really sure what to call it. And that is vehicles can use improved movement, ignore hindering, can automatically break away, and can't be assigned resources or resource attachments or have damage transferred to it. So that cuts down a lot from what that section used to say, and pretty much says the exact same thing. You've got your improved movement, you're always going to ignore hindering when you're moving around. You automatically break away, so if you're based to anybody, you just keep going. So that is different from ignoring characters for movement. You just automatically break away. So whenever time you need to break away, you just skip over the breakaway rule and keep going with your movement. The next part is that they can't be assigned resource or resource attachments. Now this is very different from what it used to say. It used to say that they couldn't be, or the errata, or in the watch list one, is that they couldn't be assigned relics. Now we've now gotten a definition between relics, which are any special objects that require a relic roll, or between resource attachments. So things such as the Phoenix Force, the Phoenix Force fragments, the hammers, even though they're not modern age anymore, anything that is coming from a battery, any of the constructs, stuff that's coming from a resource, those are resource attachments, and most times have a resource side and a relic side. So at this point, they just can't be given anything from a resource, but there's also characters, say like the 7 Deadly Sins from Trinity War, who allow you to assign relics at Force Construction. Now, these resources can be assigned those relics. During the game, they can attempt to roll for relics. Now that they've made that distinction between relics and resource attachments, vehicles are pretty much fair game in the relic department. And then the final thing is that they can't have damage transferred to it, so no masterminding onto the vehicle. The next section is piloting. What you'll notice from the old rules is that they've completely done away with autopilot. So there's no autopilot dials specifically, and the older vehicles have been errated to have a specific autopilot trait. So the new ones, for piloting, an adjacent friendly character can be given a power action to become the vehicle's one pilot and be placed on this card. So you can only ever have one pilot. Pilots can't possess the duo symbol, the team base symbol, the working together symbol, a vehicle symbol, tiny size, giant size, or colossal symbols, and can't be bystanders. So that's pretty much just singling you down to you can only use standard characters to pilot a vehicle. A pilot is only a pilot as long as that character is on this card. Vehicles without a pilot can't be given actions. Give the vehicle a power action to place the pilot into an adjacent square. Pilot abilities are traits that are only active when the pilot meets the prerequisites. Okay, so a lot is happening in that section there. And that, as I mentioned, then they did away with the autopilot function is because now vehicles without a pilot on them can't be given actions. The older ones that had the autopilot mode, they're still allowed to move, they're still allowed to make attacks, although now the older vehicles, if they make an attack without a pilot, they're dealt one avoidable damage after the attack resolves. So this time around, without that autopilot function, a vehicle is just going to sit there until someone else hops in. And then you give the vehicle the power action to place the pilot into an adjacent square. Now, earlier on in that section, it mentioned that the pilot's going to take an action to get in, and then the vehicle is going to take an action for the pilot to get out. Now, the important thing to note, there's a few things to note when doing this part, is that the action token's being given to the pilot when they hop in. So then as soon as the pilot's hopped in, that vehicle is free to make an action, do whatever they want, because that action token's being assigned to the pilot himself. And then when you are ejecting the pilot, when the pilot's coming off the vehicle, that action is being given to the vehicle, and the pilot is now free to go and do whatever the pilot would like to do with their action for the turn. Now, when the pilot is being taken off the board, they're going to follow the set of rules with characters that are off the map, and that is traits, powers. None of their stuff is going to work, and nothing is going to work against them. The one thing that people normally miss when you have a character that's being removed from the board without being removed from the game, they're still active. So in the sense that their action tokens are still there. But if you go through an entire turn where they haven't taken an action, which they wouldn't because they're off the board, they are going to clear. So it'll take a couple of turns to do it, but it is possible for a pilot to hop into a vehicle, have the vehicle move around, eject the pilot, and the pilot gets to just go. And then the next part just refers to something we're going to talk about later on, and that is the pilot abilities that you get from having someone piloting your vehicle. And that'll actually be different depending on which vehicle you're looking at, and that there will be prerequisites for the specific pilot allows you to use abilities much like vehicles did beforehand. Passengers. Vehicles can use the carry ability. Whenever they use the carry ability, do not modify their speed value from using it, and they can carry up to the number of characters next to the passenger symbol as passengers, ignoring the speed symbols of passengers. There's a lot of passengers in that passage. So basically, it allows vehicles to carry people around with them so long as they actually have a character next to their passenger sign. Now, this is Captain America's motorcycle. He does not have any passengers. Nobody can hitch a ride unless you're the actual pilot of this one. So he's not going to be carrying anybody. But there are other vehicles that do have numbers of passengers next to it, like the Sky Cycle, who can carry an extra character alongside their pilot. And with them using that carry ability, they are not going to modify, so they don't decrease their speed. They're going to be at full speed when they use that use of carry. And they ignore the speed symbols, which means that a vehicle that has a can take passengers with them can get around the fact that flight characters with the flight symbol, the wing symbol, can't be carried. So you can carry anybody that flies. The other thing to note with the passengers is that tiny sized people just like to hitch rides with anyone. So even if your vehicle has 0 passengers listed on their dial, a tiny sized character can still hitch a ride. You can still carry at least one tiny sized character with them, because apparently the tiny size ability grants a carry that is not carried. I will get to that next week. So the next section is pilot attacks. Give the vehicle a free action, and until your next turn, replace its attack, damage, and range values with those printed of the pilot. So once you have a pilot hopped in there, take a free action, and you get to replace the values. This is not a modification. This is straight replacement, much like any other power that would call you to replace a value. And so that'll be printed as well. So it's whatever is showing on the pilot's actual dial. No bonuses from relics or resources or special powers. It's only the actual numbers that are showing on the dial. And then you can give the vehicle a free action and choose a standard attack or damage power the pilot possesses. Until your next turn, the vehicle can use the chosen power, but can't use any other attack or damage powers. So, apparently this caused some confusion, so this is a separate free action from the replacing values one. So you have a free action to replace the values from the pilot, and you have a free action to be able to use a power from the pilot. Now you can either choose an attack power or a damage power, you don't get both. And once you take a pilot's power, you can't use what's showing on the dial of the bike. So I just grabbed a Hydra recruit because that's
they have stolen your Captain America's bicycle.
Okay, here. This is good. We've got Cat Falcon. Now Cat Falcon has Precision Strike. So he's going to be on the Cat bike, and I'm going to take a free action and take Precision Strike. So once I do that, I can't use anything that's showing on the dial. Now, Cap's bike doesn't show anything in the attack slot, so doesn't really make a difference. But that's how that works. If there was something showing in his attack slot, then I wouldn't be able to use it because I'm using Cat Falcon's. Sorry. And in addition to that is whether you would take the attack or damage, you can only choose between the two, but once you do, you can't use either from the bike or whatever vehicle that you're making the attack with. And that's an also important thing to note is that it's actually the vehicle making the attack. Once the pilot's there, he's off the board. We don't care about him other than looking at stats, kind of like a possessor. And then the vehicle itself is the one taking the actions, doing the attacks, so on and so forth. So the final thing is wrecked vehicles. This is an ability that has been altered from the original vehicle ability. Remove the vehicle from the map and place, that really should say when the vehicle is KO'd. When the vehicle is KO'd, remove the vehicle from the map and place a standard heavy object in one of the squares it occupied. Place the pilot into or adjacent to the square of the placed object and roll a d6. On a result of 1 to 3, deal the pilot 2 unavoidable damage. On the result of 4 to 6, deal the pilot 1 unavoidable damage. So the biggest thing to note here is that it's going to be a standard heavy, where before when vehicles were wrecked, they were ultra heavies, and when they were the big 2x4 bases, the vehicle actually physically came off the base and was placed on the map to be used as an ultra heavy. Now this time you just take a standard heavy object from outside the game, put it in at least one square. So where these guys would take up 2 squares, you put it in one of the squares that it occupied. And then you put the pilot either next to that object or on top of the object and roll it up. 1, 2, 3, you take 2 damage. 4, 5, 6, you take 1 damage. So at any point the vehicle is KO'd while being piloted, that pilot is taking damage. Now it's unavoidable damage, there's no way to get around that. That pilot crashed that vehicle and now is not walking away unscathed. The final thing to note with the vehicle rules, and this doesn't apply to all vehicles like it didn't before, is the ram ability, and it has been changed from original, so any old vehicles that had the ram ability are now considered to have this version of the ram ability. Give the vehicle a move action to use improve movement, ignore characters, and move along a direct path. A direct path is directly horizontal, directly vertical, directly horizontal, or directly diagonal. You're not going to go up 2 squares, over 2 squares, over 5. You're going to have to do a straight line. After actions resolve, make a close combat attack targeting all opposing characters whose squares were moved through. Each hit character is dealt this printed damage value, and then deal the vehicle 1 unavoidable damage for each hit character. So to make this attack, you're going to move in a straight line moving through characters. That's why it's important that they ignore characters for movement, because otherwise they would stop. So move through the characters and then end the movement. Anybody they move through, you make an attack roll. This is going to be like anytime you attack multiple characters, you do one singular roll, compare your values to their values. Everybody that is hit is dealt the printed vehicle's damage. Now, it's important to note that it's printed, so no modifiers or anything, and that it's specifically the vehicle's damage value. Sorry. And that it's specifically the vehicle's printed value and not the printed damage value that you're borrowing from your pilot. And then you're going to deal the vehicle itself one unavoidable damage for each character that they hit, because any car that's going to ram people, eventually they're going to get beat up. And so that was the brand new vehicle abilities. If there's anything like the pilot abilities themselves, that's going to be on the card, so that's going to be situational to each vehicle in question. So you just have to kind of follow the rules on the card itself that's handed out there. So if you had any questions, comments, anything you think I didn't go over, just let us know down below, and we'll see you next time for another episode of Dial It Up.
Married with Clix is brought to you by Majestic's Heroclix sales down in Costa Mesa, California. Right now, they're in the middle of storefront change. In the meantime, don't forget to check out their eBay store. If you check the link down below, they always have great Heroclix stuff at fantastic prices, and they'll ship just about anywhere.